Hey everyone, here's a video about a great technique that a lot of the earlier jazz drummers used to use as part of their timekeeping, and that was to play light quarter notes on the snare drum when they were using their other hand to play the ride cymbal or the hi-hat, like. They would generally do this pretty lightly. It's not always easy to hear it on the older recordings. And it was almost like feathering the snare drum in the way we think of feathering the bass drum, playing a light four that is almost more felt than heard. That's how they would play the snare drum. And many of the older jazz drummers did this. In fact, it was so common that I have a Metronome magazine from 1937 that Dave Tuff had a drum column in, and someone wrote in asking him, what's the basic hi-hat beat? And he writes it out and he says, this is the basic hi-hat beat, the way most drummers play it. And he actually writes out the quarter notes with the left hand on the snare drum. He writes out, and he says, that's the basic beat. So that's how common this was, that Dave Tuff would include it as just part of what the basic rhythm was. So many drummers use this. Zutty Singleton, Ray Baduke, Ben Pollack. You can see Zutty Singleton play this in the great 1961 TV special Chicago and All That Jazz when he's playing original Jelly Roll Blues. You can see that he's doing these left-hand quarter notes on the snare drum. And some of those drummers, like Zutty Singleton, Ray Baduke, Baby Dodds, they would even play these quarter notes on the snare drum with their left hand while they would do other little fills around the set with their right hand. Things maybe like. So that four on the snare drum was really just kind of part of the basic timekeeping and part of the basic beat. Joe Jones did this sometimes, Cliff Lehman. In the 1957 Sound of Jazz TV special, you can see Joe Jones doing this when he's playing Wild Man Blues with Red Allen. You can see him playing these quarter notes on the snare drum with his left hand. Cliff Lehman would do this sometimes on the great Dixie Rebels recordings. On those recordings, on the faster tunes, Cliff Lehman is mainly playing 2 and 4 on the snare drum with his left hand, but on some of the slower tunes, you can hear him playing 4 to the bar on the snare drum with his left hand. It's just a great way of keeping the snare drum part of the basic beat when you're playing on the cymbals. And Gene Krupa also used this a lot throughout his whole career. Up until he died, he was always still keeping time on the snare drum with his left hand like this. Not all the time, but he would do it quite frequently. And it was just a great way that he kept the snare drum involved in his timekeeping. I think it really added to his unique feel. And even when he was playing more accents on the snare drum with his left hand, he would still keep this light four going in between. In the same way, if you're playing a light four on the bass drum and you might throw in some accents and then go back to the light four in between, Gene Krupa would do things kind of like. That light four would still be there on the snare drum. And another way you can do this is with dead sticking. I've made some other videos about dead sticking or dead strokes, lightly pressing the stick into the head instead of letting it bounce. And that's another way you can play these left-hand quarter notes. Joe Jones did that sometimes, and J.C. Hurd did that a lot throughout his whole career. J.C. Hurd would often play dead stroke quarter notes with his left hand at a variety of tempos. Even faster. So J.C. Hurd did that a lot, and that's another way you can play this. And then one other variation is something that George Wettling would do a lot, which was he would play quarter notes on the snare drum with his left hand, but buzz beats 2 and 4, so almost like a one-handed press roll. So that's something George Wettling would do a lot. So there are a lot of nice things about this. As I mentioned, it's a way to keep the snare drum involved as part of the basic beat in your timekeeping when you're playing on the cymbals or the hi-hat. So that's nice, just to keep the snare drum involved like that. It can also really make a very solid beat and really kind of help ground the time, make things very stable. It's also just good for coordination, as simple as it seems, just to play these light quarter notes on the snare drum at a variety of tempos and really have it be locked in with the rest of what you're doing on the set can be a real challenge, and it's worth exploring. Another thing, some drummers have asked me, some drummers who are kind of new to this style, whatever this style is, if they're more used to doing things with their left hand that maybe Max Roach or Art Blakey or Philly Joe Jones would do, and they've asked me, what should I do with my left hand? And of course, there's not one answer, but these quarter notes, these light quarter notes, it's a good place to start, just to incorporate your left hand in that way. I think it's a good place to start. And just remember, you want to keep them light. Again, it's kind of like snare drum feathering, so it should be below the cymbal or the hi-hat. It shouldn't be. It's not like that. It's just kind of in there, and it's the kind of thing that you don't always, when you're playing the rest of the set, and especially when the band is playing, you don't necessarily even hear it, but you would miss it if you took it away. So again, it's just a thing that so many of the older drummers used to do, so I just wanted to make this little video about it. Hope that was informative and fun for everyone. Thank you for watching. I will be back soon.